I'm a man in my 20s who lives alone on the very top floor of an apartment block. I've had short hair for the last 10 years of my life. The longest strand on my head is maybe an inch, if that. So you can imagine my confusion when I kept finding long hairs all over my apartment. Long brunette hairs, at least 5 or 6 inches, sometimes longer. And they were everywhere. Bathroom floor, in the shower, in my cupboards, in my kitchen, on old clothes, on the living room floor and sofas. I've been single since November, and I clean often enough that I was certain it wasn't my ex-girlfriend's hair. Besides, the color didn't match. My ex-girlfriend had solid black hair, whereas these were more of a light brunette. Finding them in the shower especially threw me off, given that running water hits every surface in there 5 or more times a week. I eventually waved it off. I work with a lot of people, I use the gym, I take the bus sometimes. Hairs stick to clothes. It happens. I told myself there was a perfectly ordinary explanation and left it at that. Then, one day this past April, I finished an early morning gym session and got a call telling me I didn't need to come into work. I started walking home in a good mood, happy to have the day to myself. I live on the 5th floor, the top floor, and the building is laid out so that there's only one apartment per floor. I took the stairs instead of the elevator since I was still sweaty from the gym. Just as I turned the corner to go up the final flight from the 4th floor to the 5th, I nearly walked into my neighbor's daughter coming down the stairs. We made eye contact. We had never actually spoken before, partly because we'd never had a reason to, and partly because out of respect, I'd always been careful not to make her uncomfortable. She's somewhere around 19 to 21. I'm a bit older, and the most interaction we'd ever had was a few brief exchanges with her parents when we crossed paths on the stairs. I gave a confused hello. I was half expecting her to say she'd knocked on my door to borrow something. Instead, she gave a quiet hey and brushed straight past me. And that's when the smell hit me. My own shampoo. On her hair. Which was wet. Not damp, but genuinely fresh out of the shower, wet. I stood outside my door for a solid 2 minutes trying to process it. I told myself she could have had a perfectly innocent reason to be up here. Most generic shampoos smell alike. Maybe she'd knocked and I'd just missed something obvious. But then I tried to unlock my door, and it opened without me having to turn the key. I always double lock that door. It has a standard lock near waist level and a second, more secure lock with a separate key at shoulder height. Both were unlocked. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the shower. It was wet. I hadn't showered since the morning before. I am not the kind of person who lets something like this sit unanswered. So I went back down to the 3rd floor, knocked on the door of my neighbor's family, and waited. She opened it, but kept the chain on, just half of her face visible through the gap. I told her I didn't want to make it a police matter right now, but I knew she'd been inside my apartment, and I needed an answer. She said she just had to get something and that it wouldn't happen again. Then she closed the door. That was it. No explanation, no apology, just the door clicking shut in my face. After that, I started cleaning more thoroughly every weekend, had the locks changed, and installed a motion sensor camera above my door. It only activates and records on the steps leading up to my floor, so the neighbors on the 4th floor still have their privacy. Looking back, I believe she had been coming and going since January. That's my earliest memory of finding those hairs. She never took anything of obvious value. No laptop, none of the watches I keep at home. As far as I could tell, she was showering, eating some of my food, and spending time in my apartment while I was at work. I also told the retired couple on the 4th floor that I suspected someone had been trying to break in. I kept it vague, not wanting to spread gossip about the family below, and asked them to keep an ear out when I wasn't home. I wasn't particularly scared. I'm around 200 pounds and do a lot of combat training. I was mostly just deeply unsettled by the idea that my personal space had been violated repeatedly without me ever noticing. Someone reached out and suggested I check my coats and bags for AirTags as a possible explanation for how she knew to leave that day before I arrived. I didn't think I'd find anything given how often I clean, but I decided to do a thorough sweep anyway. My cousin's husband is a police officer, so I went to him directly rather than going through official channels cold. He came over to my apartment first, and I walked him through everything. What happened on the stairs, the changes I'd noticed around the place since January, the hairs, the missing food, the unlocked door. He did a thorough check even after my cleaning and managed to find a few remaining hairs, which he bagged up. I gave him my full statement with as many specific dates as I could recall. He advised me not to approach the family again myself, not even with a friend present, to avoid muddying the waters legally or giving anyone room to maneuver. A few days later, he and his partner went to speak to the family on a Sunday, knowing both parents would likely be home. She confessed immediately, broke down in tears, and apologized. His partner had made clear that 5 months of entering someone's home, even with a key, is still very much a criminal offense and could result in a custodial sentence, regardless of whether anything was stolen. I don't know how much of that was technically accurate versus being used as pressure to get a confession, but it worked. They spoke with her and both parents together for about an hour. My police contact then came up to my apartment and gave me a full breakdown of what she had said. The first question was how she even got a key. The locks on our doors use a code embedded in the barrel, accessible only to the manufacturer or approved locksmiths. She knew this because her parents had gone through the same process when they first moved into the building. She contacted the same locksmith from back then. He presumably remembered the family and the apartment, but didn't pay attention to the floor number. He came over, removed the barrel, read the code, had a copy made, and left. I had 2 different brands of lock on my door, but they apparently both work on the same principle, so having 2 locks made no practical difference. As for what she was actually doing in my apartment, several people in the comments had suggested she simply needed somewhere quiet. And they were right. She has 2 younger step-siblings at home, and her mother works as a private tutor, which means there are almost always other children around the house. She would tell her parents she was going to study at the college library or stay at a friend's place, then use my apartment as somewhere to work and decompress in peace. She chose mine specifically because my schedule was predictable, a standard 9 to 5, with the gym added on at the start, meaning she reliably had the place to herself from around 6 in the morning until 5 in the evening. She had been doing it since January. My guess on the timeline was correct. It started shortly after she apparently figured out that I had broken up with my girlfriend around November. My girlfriend used to stay at mine sometimes while I was at work, so that could have created a very awkward situation if they had crossed paths. The question of how she knew to leave in time that day, and how she knew on other mornings whether I was going to the gym or not, turned out to have 2 parts. The commercial gym I use has an app that, regardless of membership status, shows a live head count for each branch. Anyone can download it, scan the QR code at the entrance, and add a location to their list. The display shows something like a branch number, an address, and the current occupancy as a figure and percentage. She would check the app in the morning, and if the count went up by 1 around 6 or 6:30 while she could hear me using the elevator or heading downstairs, she knew the apartment was empty. The second part was the thing that bothered me most. She had put an AirTag on my car. She claimed she had only done it recently, and that initially she had simply gambled on me following my usual routine. But at some point, one thing led to another. The AirTag was stuck to the underside of the vehicle. On the day we ran into each other, she had refreshed the gym app, seen that I had left, then noticed my car hadn't moved. She put the pieces together and tried to get out quickly. She didn't have time to lock up behind her, and she was still on the stairs when I came around the corner. She said she didn't use the shower every time, only on hot days or days she couldn't shower at home. I have no way of verifying that. Her parents had never noticed because her father leaves for work around 5 in the morning, and her mother, once she's up, is occupied with preparing for her own students and getting the younger children out the door. A 20-year-old saying she's heading to the library or a friend's place wasn't something that raised any flags. As for whether she had any feelings toward me, my contact didn't ask, or at least didn't report back on it. It didn't seem like the most important detail given everything else. The father came to my door in person and apologized. He offered to cover the cost of the camera I installed, since his daughter was the direct cause of it, but it was cheap enough that I said no. We talked for 10 or 15 minutes. He said that something like this would never have crossed his mind in a million years. She had always been quiet, well-behaved, someone who would disappear into a spare room when guests came over rather than socialize. He mentioned she'd never had a boyfriend, only a handful of friends, and that her social skills had always been somewhat limited. He offered money for the missing food, the new locks, and the cleaning, but I declined that too. The mother apologized by text. I decided not to press charges. I'm still not happy about it, especially the AirTag, which is the part that sits worst with me. But the family has been genuinely apologetic, she confessed, without being pushed hard. And I don't think there's anything to gain from taking it further legally. I did want a personal apology from her directly, and the father said he would send her to speak to me once things had calmed down a little. Apparently, she hadn't left her room in days. She had also, for what it's worth, used my bed and worn some of my clothes. I wish I could say that surprised me at this point. The one piece of practical advice I'd pass on to anyone reading this: check the devices connected to your home Wi-Fi regularly. If I had done that at any point, I would have seen an unfamiliar phone and laptop on the network months ago. Given the number of family members who visit and connect their devices, I might have missed an extra phone. But I would definitely have noticed an extra laptop. Change your Wi-Fi password occasionally and actually look at what's connected to it. It's the kind of thing nobody thinks to do until something like this happens.